Chapter 26 of Mary Barton. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell. Chapter 26. The Journey to Liverpool. Like a bark upon the sea, life is floating over death. Above, below, encircling thee, danger lurks in every breath. Parted art thou from the grave only by a plank most frail, tossed upon the restless wave, sport of every fickle gale. Let the skies be e'er so clear, and so calm and still the sea, shipwreck yet has he to fear, who life's voyager will be. Ruckert. The early trains for Liverpool on a Monday morning were crowded by attorneys, attorneys' clerks, plaintiffs, defendants, and witnesses, all going to the assizes. They were a motley assembly, each with some cause for anxiety stirring at his heart, though after all, that is saying little or nothing, for we are all of us in the same predicament through life, each with a fear and a hope from childhood to death. Among the passengers there was Mary Barton, dressed in the blue gown and obnoxious plaid shawl. Common as railroads are now in all places as a means of transit, and especially in Manchester, Mary had never been on one before, and she felt bewildered by the hurry, the noise of people and bells and horns, the whiz and the scream of the arriving trains. The very journey itself seemed to her a matter of wonder. She had a back seat, and looked towards the factory chimneys and the cloud of smoke which hovers over Manchester, with a feeling akin to the Heimweh. She was losing sight of the familiar objects of her childhood for the first time, and unpleasant as those objects are to most, she yearned after them with some of the same sentiment which gives pathos to the thoughts of the emigrant. The cloud shadows which give beauty to Chatmoss, the picturesque houses of old Newton, what were they to Mary, whose heart was full of many things? Yet she seemed to look at them earnestly as they glided past, but neither saw nor heard. She neither saw nor heard till some well-known names fell upon her ear. Two lawyers' clerks were discussing the cases to come on that assizes. Of course, the murder case, as it had come to be termed, held a conspicuous place in their conversation. They had no doubt of the result. Juries are always very unwilling to convict on circumstantial evidence, it is true, said one, but here there can hardly be any doubt. If it had not been so clear a case, replied the other, I should have said that they were injudicious in hurrying on the trial so much. Still, more evidence might have been collected. They tell me, said the first speaker, the people in Gardiner's office I mean, that it was really feared the old gentleman would have gone out of his mind if the trial had been delayed. He was with Mr. Gardiner as many as 7 times on Saturday, and called him up at night to suggest that some letter should be written, or something done to secure the verdict. Poor old man, answered his companion, who can wonder? An only son, such a death, the disagreeable circumstances attending it. I had not time to read the Guardian on Sunday, but I understand it was some dispute about a factory girl. Yes, some such person. Of course she'll be examined, and Williams will do it in style. I shall slip out from our court to hear him, if I can hit the nick of time. And if you can get a place, you mean, for depend upon it the court will be crowded. Ay, the ladies, sweet souls, will come in shoals to hear a trial for murder, and see the murderer, and watch the judge put on his black cap. And then go home and groan over the Spanish ladies who take delight in bulls' fights, such unfeminine creatures. Then they went on to other subjects. It was but another drop to Mary's cup, but she was nearly in that state which Crabbe describes, for when so full the cup of sorrows flows, add but a drop, it instantly overflows. And now they were in the tunnel, and now they were in Liverpool, and she must rouse herself from the torpor of mind and body which was creeping over her, the result of much anxiety and fatigue, and several sleepless nights. She asked a policeman the way to Milk House Yard, and following his directions with the savoir-faire of a town-bred girl, she reached a little court leading out of a busy, thronged street, not far from the docks. When she entered the quiet little yard, she stopped to regain her breath, and to gather strength, for her limbs trembled and her heart beat violently. All the unfavourable contingencies she had, until now, forbidden herself to dwell upon, came forward to her mind. The possibility, the bare possibility, of Jem being an accomplice in the murder, the still greater possibility that he had not fulfilled his intention of going part of the way with Will, but had been let off by some little accidental occurrence from his original intention, and that he had spent the evening with those, whom it was now too late to bring forward as witnesses. But sooner or later she must know the truth, so taking courage she knocked on the door of a house. "Is this Mrs Jones's?" she inquired. "Next door but one," was the curt answer. And even this extra minute was a reprieve. Mrs Jones was busy washing, and would have spoken angrily to the person who knocked so gently at the door, if anger had been in her nature, but she was a soft, helpless kind of woman, and only sighed over the many interruptions she had had to her business that unlucky Monday morning. But the feeling which would have been anger in a more impatient temper, took the form of prejudice against the disturber, whoever he or she might be. Mary's fluttered and excited appearance strengthened this prejudice in Mrs Jones's mind, as she stood stripping the soap-suds off her arms, while she eyed her visitor, and waited to be told what her business was. But no words would come. Mary's voice seemed choked up in her throat. "Pray, what do you want, young woman?" coldly asked Mrs Jones at last. "I want—oh, is Will Wilson here?" "No, he is not," replied Mrs Jones, inclining to shut the door in her face. "Is he not come back from the Isle of Man?" asked Mary, sickening. "He never went. He stayed in Manchester too long, as perhaps you know already." And again the door seemed closing. But Mary bent forward with suppliant action, as some young tree bends when blown by the rough autumnal wind, and gasped out, "Tell me, where is he?" Mrs Jones suspected some love affair, and perhaps one of the not most creditable kind, but the distress of the pale young creature before her was so obvious and so pitiable, that were she ever so sinful, Mrs Jones could no longer uphold her short, reserved manner. "He's gone this very morning, my poor girl. Step in, and I'll tell you about it." "Gone!" cried Mary. "How gone? I must see him. It's a matter of life and death. He can save the innocent from being hanged. He cannot be gone. How gone?" "Sailed, my dear. Sailed in the John Cropper this very blessed morning." "Sailed?" Chapter 26. Of Mary Barton. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Mary Barton by Elizabeth Cleghorn Gaskell. Chapter 27. In the Liverpool Docks. Yon is our quay. Hark to the clamour in that miry road, bounded and narrowed by yon vessel's load. The lumbering wealth she empties round the place, package and parcel, hogshead, chest, and case, while the loud seaman and the angry hind, mingling in business, bellow to the wind. Crabbe. Mary staggered into the house. Mrs Jones placed her tenderly in a chair, and there stood bewildered by her side. "Oh, father, father!" muttered she, "what have you done? What must I do? Must the innocent die, or he whom I fear? Oh, what am I saying?" said she, looking around affrighted, and seemingly reassured by Mrs Jones's countenance. "I am so helpless, so weak, but a poor girl after all. How can I tell what is right? Father, you have always been so kind to me, and you to be— Never mind, all will come right in the grave." "Save us and bless us!" exclaimed Mrs Jones, "if I don't think she's gone out of her wits!" "No, I am not," said Mary, catching at the words, and with a strong effort controlling the mind she felt to be wandering, while the red blood flushed to scarlet the heretofore white cheek. "I'm not out of my senses. There is so much to be done, so much, and no one but me to do it, you know, though I can't rightly tell what it is." Looking up with bewilderment into Mrs Jones's face, "I must not go mad whatever comes, at least not yet. No," bracing herself up, "something may yet be done, and I must do it. Sailed, did you say? The John Cropper sailed?" "Ay, she went out of the dock last night, to be ready for the morning's tide." "I thought she was not to sail till to-morrow," murmured Mary. "So did Will. He's lodged here long, so we all call him Will," replied Mrs Jones. The mate had told him so, I believe, and he never knew different till he got to Liverpool on Friday morning. But as soon as he heard, he gave up going to the Isle of Man, and just ran over to Rhyl with the mate, one John Harris, as has friends a bit beyond Abergele. You may have heard him speak on him, for they are great chums, though I've my own opinion of Harris." "And he sailed?" repeated Mary, trying by repetition to realize the fact to herself. "Ay, he went on board last night to be ready for the morning's tide, as I said afore, and my boy went to see the ship go down the river, and came back all agog with the sight. Here, Charley, Charley!" She called out loudly for her son, but Charley was one of those boys who are never far to seek, as the Lancashire people say, when anything is going on, a mysterious conversation, an unusual event, a fire or a riot, anything, in short. Such boys are the little omnipresent people of this world. Charley had, in fact, been spectator and auditor all this time, though for a little while he had been engaged in dollying and a few other mischievous feats in the washing line, which had prevented his attention from being fully given to his mother's conversation with the strange girl who had entered. "Oh, Charley, there you are! Did you not see the John Cropper sail down the river this morning? Tell the young woman about it, for I think she hardly credits me." "I saw her tugged down the river by a steamboat, which comes to the same thing," replied he. "Oh, if I had but come last night!" moaned Mary. "But I never thought of it. I never thought but what he knew right when he said he would be back from the Isle of Man on Monday morning, and not afore. And now some one must die for my negligence." "Die!" exclaimed the lad. "How?" "Oh, Will would have proved an alibi, but he's gone, and what am I to do?" "Don't give it up yet," cried the energetic boy, interested at once in the case. "Let's have a try for him. We are but where we were, if we fail." Mary roused herself. The sympathetic "we" gave her heart and hope. "But what can be done? You say he sailed. What can be done?" But she spoke louder, and in a more lifelike tone. "No, I did not say he'd sailed. Mother said that, and women know naught about such matters. You see," proud of his office of instructor, and insensibly influenced, as all about her were, by Mary's sweet, earnest, lovely countenance, "there's sandbanks at the mouth of the river, and ships can't get over them but at high water, especially ships of heavy burden, like the John Cropper. Now she was tugged down the river at low water, or pretty near, and will have to lie some time before the water will be high enough to float her over the banks. So hold up your head. You've a chance yet, though maybe but a poor one." "But what must I do?" asked Mary, to whom all this explanation had been a vague mystery. "Do?" said the boy impatiently. "Why, have I not told you? Only women, begging your pardon, are so stupid at understanding about anything belonging to the sea. You must get a boat, and make all haste and sail after him, after the John Cropper. You may overtake her, or you may not. It's just a chance, but she's heavy laden, and that's in your favour. She'll draw many feet of water." Mary had humbly and eagerly, oh, how eagerly, listened to this young Sir Oracle's speech, but try as she would, she could only understand that she must make haste, and sail somewhere. "I beg your pardon," and her little acknowledgment of inferiority in this speech pleased the lad, and made him her still more zealous friend. "I beg your pardon," said she, "but I don't know where to get a boat. Are there boat stands?" The lad laughed outright. "You're not long in Liverpool, I guess. Boat stands! No, go down to the pier, any pier will do, and hire a boat. You'll be at no loss when once you are there. Only make haste." "Oh, you need not tell me that, if I but knew how," said Mary, trembling with eagerness. "But you say right. I never was here before, and I don't know my way to the place you speak on. Only tell me, and I'll not lose a minute." "Mother," said the wilful lad, "I'm going to show her the way to the pier. I'll be back in an hour or so," he added in a lower tone. And before the gentle Mrs Jones could collect her scattered wits sufficiently to understand half of the hastily formed plan, her son was scuttling down the street, closely followed by Mary's half-running steps. Presently he slackened his pace sufficiently to enable him to enter into conversation with Mary, for once escaped from the reach of his mother's recalling voice, he thought he might venture to indulge his curiosity. "Ahem! What's your name? It's so awkward to be calling you young woman." "My name is Mary Barton," answered she, anxious to propitiate one who seemed so willing to exert himself on her behalf, or else she grudged every word which caused the slightest relaxation in her speed, although her chest seemed tightened, and her head throbbing, from the rate at which they were walking. And you want Will Wilson to provide an alibi, is that it? Yes, oh yes, can we not cross now? No, wait a minute, it's the teagle hoisting above your head I'm afraid of, and who is it that's to be tried? Jem. Oh, lad, can't we get past? They rushed under the great bales quivering in the air above their heads, and pressed onward for a few minutes, till Master Charley again saw fit to walk a little slower, and ask a few more questions. Mary, is Jem your brother, or your sweetheart, that you're so set upon saving him? No, no, replied she, but with something of hesitation, that made the shrewd boy yet more anxious to clear up the mystery. Perhaps he's your cousin, then? Many a girl has a cousin who is not a sweetheart. No, he's neither kith nor kin to me. What's the matter? What are you stopping for? Said she, with nervous terror, as Charley turned back a few steps, and peered up a side street. Oh, nothing to flurry you so, Mary. I heard you say to mother you had never been in Liverpool before, and if you'll only look up this street, you may see the back windows of our Exchange. Such a building as yon is, with Naomi hiding under a blanket, and Lord Admiral Nelson, and a few more people in the middle of the court. No, come here, as Mary, in her eagerness, was looking at any window that caught her eye first, to satisfy the boy. Here, then, now you can see it. You can say, now, you've seen Liverpool Exchange. Yes, to be sure, it's a beautiful window, I'm sure. But are we near the boats? I'll stop as I come back, you know, only I think we'd better get on now. Oh, if the wind's in your favour, you'll be down the river in no time, and catch Will, I'll be bound, and if it's not, why, you know the minute it took you to look at the Exchange will be neither here nor there. Another rush onwards, till one of the long crossings near the dock caused a stoppage, and gave Mary time for breathing, and Charley leisure to ask another question. You've never said where you come from? Manchester, replied she. Ay, then, you've a power of things to see. Liverpool beats Manchester hollow, they say. A nasty, smoky hole, bean't it? Are you bound to live there? Oh, yes, it's my home. Well, I don't think I could abide a home in the middle of smoke. Look there, now you see the river. That's something now you'd give a deal for in Manchester. Look! And Mary did look, and saw down an opening made in the forest of masts belonging to the vessels in dock, the glorious river, along which white-sailed ships were gliding with the ensigns of all nations, not braving the battle, but telling of the distant lands, spicy or frozen, that sent to the mighty mart for their comforts or their luxuries. She saw small boats passing to and fro on that glittering highway, but she also saw such puffs and clouds of smoke from the countless steamers, that she wondered at Charley's intolerance of the smoke of Manchester. Across the swing bridge, along the pier, and they stood breathless by a magnificent dock, where hundreds of ships lay motionless during the process of loading and unloading. The cries of the sailors, the variety of languages used by the passers-by, and the entire novelty of the sight compared with anything which Mary had ever seen, made her feel most helpless and forlorn, and she clung to her young guide as to one who alone by his superior knowledge could interpret between her and the new race of men by whom she was surrounded, for a new race sailors might be reasonably considered to a girl who had hitherto seen none but inland dwellers, and those, for the greater part, factory people. In that new world of sight and sound, she still bore one prevailing thought, and though her eye glanced over the ships and the wide-spreading river, her mind was full of the thought of reaching Will. "Why are we here?" she asked of Charley. "There are no little boats about, and I thought I was to go in a little boat. Those ships are never meant for short distances, are they?" "To be sure not," replied he, rather contemptuously. "But the John Cropper lay in this dock, and I know many of the sailors, and if I could see one I knew, I'd ask him to run up the mast, and see if he could catch a sight of her in the offing. If she's weighed her anchor, no use for your going, you know." Mary assented quietly to this speech, as if she were as careless as Charley seemed now to be about her overtaking Will, but in truth her heart was sinking within her, and she no longer felt the energy which had hitherto upheld her. Her bodily strength was giving way, and she stood cold and shivering, although the noonday sun beat down with considerable power on the shadeless spot where she was standing. "Here's Tom Bourne," said Charley, and altering his manner from the patronizing key in which he had spoken to Mary, he addressed a weather-beaten old sailor who came rolling along the pathway where they stood, his hands in his pockets and his quid in his mouth, with very much the air of one who had nothing to do but look about him and spit right and left. Addressing this old tar, Charley made known to him his wish in slang, which to Mary was almost inaudible and quite unintelligible, and which I am too much of a landlubber to repeat correctly. Mary watched looks and actions with a renovated keenness of perception. She saw the old man listen attentively to Charley, she saw him eye her over from head to foot, and wind up his inspection with a little nod of approbation, for her very shabbiness and poverty of dress were creditable signs to the experienced old sailor, and then she watched him leisurely swing himself onto a ship in the basin, and borrowing a glass, run up the mast with the speed of a monkey. "He'll fall," said she in a fright, clutching at Charley's arm, and judging the sailor, from his storm-marked face and unsteady walk on land, to be much older than he really was. "Not he," said Charley. "He's at the masthead now. See, he's looking through his glass, and using his arms as steady as if he were on dry land. Why, I've been up the mast, many and many a time, only don't tell mother. She thinks I'm to be a shoemaker, but I've made up my mind to be a sailor, only there's no good arguing with a woman. You'll not tell her, Mary?" "Oh, see!" exclaimed she. His secret was very safe with her, for in fact she had not heard it. "See! He's coming down, he's down. Speak to him, Charley." But unable to wait another instant, she called out herself, "Can you see the John Cropper? Is she there yet?" "Ay, ay," he answered, and coming quickly up to them, he hurried them away to seek for a boat, saying the bar was already covered, and in an hour the ship would hoist her sails and be off. "You've the wind right against you, and must use oars. No time to lose." They ran to some steps leading down to the water. They beckoned to some watermen, who, suspecting the real state of the case, appeared in no hurry for a fare, but leisurely brought their boat alongside the stairs, as if it were a matter of indifference to them whether they were engaged or not, while they conversed together in a few words, and in an undertone, respecting the charge they should make. "Oh, pray make haste," called Mary. "I want you to take me to the John Cropper. Where is she, Charley? Tell them. I don't rightly know the words, only make haste." "In the offing, she is, sure enough, miss," answered one of the men, shoving Charley on one side, regarding him as too young to be a principal in the bargain. "I don't think we can go, Dick," said he, with a wink to his companion. "There's the gentleman over at New Brighton as wants us." "But mayhap the young woman will pay us handsome for giving her a last look at her sweetheart," interposed the other. "Oh, how much do you want? Only make haste. I've enough to pay you, but every moment is precious," said Mary. "Ay, that it is. Less than an hour won't take us to the mouth of the river, and she'll be off by 2 o'clock." Poor Mary's ideas of plenty of money, however, were different to those entertained by the boatman. Only 14 or 15 shillings remained out of the sovereign Margaret had lent her, and the boatman, imagining plenty to mean no less than several pounds, insisted upon receiving a sovereign, an exorbitant fare, by the by, although reduced from their first demand of 30 shillings. While Charley, with a boy's impatience of delay, and disregard to money, kept urging, "Give it to 'em, Mary. They'll none of them take you for less. It's your only chance. There's St. Nicholas ringing 1. "I've only got 14 and 9 pence," cried she in despair, after counting over her money, "but I'll give you my shawl, and you can sell it for 4 or 5 shillings. Oh, won't that much do?" asked she in such a tone of voice that they must indeed have hard hearts who could refuse such agonized entreaty. They took her on board. And in less than 5 minutes she was rocking and tossing in a boat for the first time in her life, alone with 2 rough-looking, hard-looking men. End of chapter 27. Of Mary Barton. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Mary Barton by Elizabeth Cleghorn Gaskell. Chapter 28. John Cropper, ahoy! A wet sheet and a flowing sea, a wind that follows fast, and fills the white and rustling sail, and bends the gallant mast. And bends the gallant mast, my boys, while like the eagle free, away the good ship flies, and leaves old England on the lee. Allan Cunningham. Mary had not understood that Charley was not coming with her. In fact, she had not thought about it till she perceived his absence, as they pushed off from the landing-place, and remembered that she had never thanked him for all his kind interest in her behalf, and now his absence made her feel most lonely, even his, the little mushroom friend of an hour's growth. The boat threaded her way through the maze of larger vessels which surrounded the shore, bumping against one, kept off by the oars from going right against another, overshadowed by a third, until at length they were fairly out on the broad river, away from either shore, the sights and sounds of land being heard in the distance. And then came a sort of pause. Both wind and tide were against the two men, and labour as they would, they made but little way. Once Mary, in her impatience, had risen up to obtain a better view of the progress they had made, but the men had roughly told her to sit down immediately, and she dropped on her seat like a chidden child, although the impatience was still at her heart. But now she grew sure they were turning off from the straight course which they had hitherto kept on the Cheshire side of the river, whither they had gone to avoid the force of the current, and after a short time she could not help naming her conviction, as a kind of nightmare dread and belief came over her, that everything animate and inanimate was in league against her one sole aim and object of overtaking Will. They answered gruffly. They saw a boatman whom they knew, and were desirous of obtaining his services as a steersman, so that both might row with greater effect. They knew what they were about. So she sat silent with clenched hands while the parley went on, the explanation was given, the favour asked and granted. But she was sickening all the time with nervous fear. They had been rowing a long time, half a day it seemed, at least, yet Liverpool appeared still close at hand, and Mary began almost to wonder that the men were not as much disheartened as she was, when the wind, which had been hitherto against them, dropped, and thin clouds began to gather over the sky, shutting out the sun, and casting a chilly gloom over everything. There was not a breath of air, and yet it was colder than when the soft violence of the westerly wind had been felt. The men renewed their efforts. The boat gave a bound forwards at every pull of the oars. The water was glassy and motionless, reflecting tint by tint of the Indian ink sky above. Mary shivered, and her heart sank within her. Still, now they evidently were making progress. Then the steersman pointed to a rippling line on the river only a little way off, and the men disturbed Mary, who was watching the ships that lay in what appeared to her the open sea, to get at their sails. She gave a little start and rose. Her patience, her grief, and perhaps her silence had begun to win upon the men. "Yon second to the nor'ard is the John Cropper. Wind's right now, and sails will soon carry us alongside of her." He had forgotten, or perhaps he did not like to remind Mary, that the same wind which now bore their little craft along with easy, rapid motion would also be favourable to the John Cropper. But as they looked with straining eyes, as if to measure the decreasing distance that separated them from her, they saw her sails unfurl and flap in the breeze, till, catching the right point, they bellied forth into white roundness, and the ship began to plunge and heave, as if she were a living creature, impatient to be off. "They're heaving anchor!" said one of the boatmen to the other, as the faint, musical cry of the sailors came floating over the waters that still separated them. Full of the spirit of the chase, though as yet ignorant of Mary's motives, the men sprung to hoist another sail. It was fully as much as the boat could bear, in the keen, gusty east wind which was now blowing, and she bent, and laboured, and ploughed, and creaked upbraidingly as if tasked beyond her strength, but she sped along with a gallant swiftness. They drew nearer, and they heard the distant ahoy more clearly. It ceased. The anchor was up, and the ship was away. Mary stood up, steadying herself by the mast, and stretched out her arms, imploring the flying vessel to stay its course, by that mute action, while the tears streamed down her cheeks. The men caught up their oars and hoisted them in the air, and shouted to arrest attention. They were seen by the men aboard the larger craft, but they were too busy, with all the confusion prevalent in an outward-bound vessel, to pay much attention. There were coils of ropes and seamen's chests to be stumbled over at every turn. There were animals, not properly secured, roaming bewildered about the deck, adding their pitiful lowings and bleatings to the aggregate of noise. There were carcasses not cut up, looking like corpses of sheep and pigs rather than like mutton and pork. There were sailors running here and there and everywhere, having had no time to fall into method, and with their minds divided between thoughts of the land and the people they had left, and the present duties on board ship, while the captain strove hard to procure some kind of order by hasty commands given in a loud, impatient voice, to right and left, starboard and larboard, cabin and steerage. As he paced the deck with a chafed step, vexed at one or two little mistakes on the part of the mate, and suffering himself from the pain of separation from wife and children, but showing his suffering only by his outward irritation, he heard a hail from the shabby little river-boat that was striving to overtake his winged ship. For the men fearing that, as the ship was now fairly over the bar, they should only increase the distance between them, and being now within shouting range, had asked of Mary her more particular desire. Her throat was dry, all musical sound had gone out of her voice, but in a loud, harsh whisper she told the men her errand of life and death, and they hailed the ship. "We're come for one William Wilson, who is wanted to prove an alibi in Liverpool assize courts to-morrow. James Wilson is to be tried for a murder done on Thursday night, when he was with William Wilson. Anything more, missus?" asked the boatman of Mary, in a lower voice, and taking his hands down from his mouth. "Say I'm Mary Barton. Oh, the ship is going on. Oh, for the love of heaven, ask them to stop." The boatman was angry at the little regard paid to his summons, and called out again, repeating the message with the name of the young woman who sent it, and interlarding it with sailors' oaths. The ship flew along, away, the boat struggled after. They could see the captain take his speaking trumpet. And oh, and alas, they heard his words. He swore a dreadful oath, he called Mary a disgraceful name, and he said he would not stop his ship for any one, nor could he part with a single hand, whoever swung for it. The words came in unpitying clearness with their trumpet sound. Mary sat down, looking like one who prays in the death agony. For her eyes were turned up to that heaven, where mercy dwelleth, while her blue lips quivered, though no sound came. Then she bowed her head, and hid it in her hands. "Hark! Yon sailor hails us." She looked up, and her heart stopped its beating to listen. William Wilson stood as near the stern of the vessel as he could get, and, unable to obtain the trumpet from the angry captain, made a tube of his own hands. "So help me God, Mary Barton, I'll come back in the pilot-boat time enough to save the life of the innocent." "What does he say?" asked Mary wildly, as the voice died away in the increasing distance, while the boatmen cheered, in their kindled sympathy with their passenger. "What does he say?" repeated she. "Tell me, I could not hear." She had heard with her ears, but her brain refused to recognize the sense. They repeated his speech, all three speaking at once, with many comments, while Mary looked at them and then at the vessel far away. "I don't rightly know about it," said she sorrowfully. "What is the pilot-boat?" They told her, and she gathered the meaning out of the sailors' slang which enveloped it. There was a hope still, although so slight and faint. "How far does the pilot go with the ship?" "To different distances," they said. Some pilots would go as far as Holyhead for the chance of the homeward-bound vessels, others only took the ships over the banks. Some captains were more cautious than others, and the pilots had different ways. The wind was against the homeward-bound vessels, so perhaps the pilot aboard the John Cropper would not care to go far out. How soon would he come back? There were 3 boatmen and 3 opinions, varying from 12 hours to 2 days. Nay, the man who gave his vote for the longest time, on having his judgment disputed, grew stubborn, and doubled the time, and thought it might be the end of the week before the pilot-boat came home. They began disputing and urging reasons, and Mary tried to understand them, but independently of their nautical language, a veil seemed drawn over her mind, and she had no clear perception of anything that passed. Her very words seemed not her own, and beyond her power of control, for she found herself speaking quite differently to what she meant. One by one her hopes had fallen away, and left her desolate, and, though a chance yet remained, she could no longer hope. She felt certain it, too, would fade and vanish. She sank into a kind of stupor. All outward objects harmonized with her despair, the gloomy leaden sky, the deep dark waters below, of a still heavier shade of colour, the cold flat yellow shore in the distance, which no ray lightened up, the nipping, cutting wind. She shivered with her depression of mind and body. The sails were taken down, of course, on the return to Liverpool, and the progress they made, rowing and tacking, was very slow. The men talked together, disputing about the pilots at first, and then about matters of local importance, in which Mary would have taken no interest at any time, and she gradually became drowsy, irrepressibly so, indeed, for in spite of her jerking efforts to keep awake, she sank away to the bottom of the boat, and there lay crouched on a rough heap of sails, rope, and tackles of various kinds. The measured beat of the waters against the sides of the boat, and the musical boom of the more distant waves, were more lulling than silence, and she slept sound. Once she opened her eyes heavily, and dimly saw the old, grey, rough boatman, who had stood out the most obstinately for the full fare, covering her with his thick pea-jacket. He had taken it off on purpose, and was doing it tenderly in his way, but before she could rouse herself up to thank him, she had dropped off to sleep again. At last, in the dusk of evening, they arrived at the landing-place from which they had started some hours before. The men spoke to Mary, but though she mechanically replied, she did not stir, so at length they were obliged to shake her. She stood up, shivering and puzzled as to her whereabouts. "Now, tell me where you are bound to, missus," said the grey old man, "and maybe I can put you in the way." She slowly comprehended what he said, and went through the process of recollection, but very dimly and with much labour. She put her hand into her pocket and pulled out her purse, and shook its contents into the man's hand, and then began meekly to unpin her shawl, although they had turned away without asking for it. "No, no," said the old man, who lingered on the step before springing into the boat, and to whom she mutely offered the shawl. "Keep it. It were only for to try you. Some folks say they've no more, blunt, when all the while they've gotten a mint." "Thank you," she said in a dull, low tone. "Where are you bound to? I axed that question afore," said the gruff old fellow. "I don't know. I am a stranger," replied she quietly, with a strange absence of anxiety under the circumstances. "But you mun find out then," he said sharply. "Pierhead's no place for a young woman to be standing on, gapesaying." "I've a card somewhere as will tell me," she answered, and the man, partly relieved, jumped into the boat, which was now pushing off to make way for the arrivals from some steamer. Mary felt in her pocket for the card, on which was written the name of the street where she was to have met Mr. Bridgenorth at 2 o'clock, where Job and Mrs. Wilson were to have been, and where she was to have learnt from the former the particulars of some respectable lodging. It was not to be found. She tried to brighten her perceptions, and felt again, and took out the little articles her pocket contained, her empty purse, her pocket handkerchief, and such little things, but it was not there. In fact, she had dropped it when, so eager to embark, she had pulled out her purse to reckon up her money. She did not know this, of course. She only knew it was gone. It added but little to the despair that was creeping over her, but she tried a little more to help herself, though every minute her mind became more cloudy. She strove to remember where Will had lodged, but she could not. Name, street, everything had passed away, and it did not signify. Better she were lost than found. She sat down quietly on the top step of the landing, and gazed down into the dark, dank water below. Once or twice a spectral thought loomed among the shadows of her brain, a wonder whether beneath that cold, dismal surface there would not be rest from the troubles of earth. But she could not hold an idea before her for 2 consecutive moments, and she forgot what she thought about before she could act upon it. So she continued sitting motionless, without looking up, or regarding in any way the insults to which she was subjected. Through the darkening light the old boatman had watched her, interested in her in spite of himself, and his scoldings of himself. When the landing-place was once more comparatively clear, he made his way towards it, across boats and along planks, swearing at himself while he did so, for an old fool. He shook Mary's shoulder violently. "Damn you, I asked you again where you're bound to. Don't sit there, stupid. Where are we going to?" "I don't know," sighed Mary. "Come, come, avast with that story. You said a bit ago you'd had a card, which was to tell you where to go." "I had, but I've lost it. Never mind." She looked again down upon the black mirror below. He stood by her, striving to put down his better self, but he could not. He shook her again. She looked up, as if she had forgotten him. "What do you want?" she asked wearily. "Come with me, and be damned to you," replied he, clutching her arm to pull her up. She arose and followed him with the unquestioning docility of a little child. Chapter 28.
Of Mary Barton. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Belinda Brown of Indianapolis, Indiana. Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell. Chapter 25. Mrs. Wilson's Determination. Something there was, what none presumed to say, clouds lightly passing on a smiling day, whispers and hints which went from ear to ear, and mixed reports no judge on earth could clear. Crabbe. Curious conjectures he may always make, and either side of dubious questions take. Ibid. Mary went home. Oh, how her head did ache, and how dizzy her brain was growing! But there would be time enough, she felt, for giving way hereafter. She sat quiet and still by an effort, sitting near the window, and looking out it, but seeing nothing, when all at once she caught sight of something which roused her up, and made her draw back. But it was too late. She had been seen. Sally Leadbitter flaunted into the little dingy room, making it gaudy with the Sunday excess of colouring in her dress. She was really curious to see Mary. Her connection with the murder seemed to have made her into a sort of lusa natura, and was almost, by some, expected to have made a change in her personal appearance, so earnestly did they stare at her. But Mary had been too much absorbed the last day or two to notice this. Now Sally had a grand view, and looked her over and over, a very different thing from looking her through and through, and almost learned her off by heart. Her everyday gown, Hoyle's print, you know, that lilac thing with the high body she was so fond of, a little black silk handkerchief just knotted round her neck, like a boy, her hair all taken back from her face, as if she wanted to keep her head cool. She would always keep that hair of hers so long, and her hands twitching continually about. Such particulars would make Sally into a Gazette extraordinary the next morning at the workroom, and were worth coming for, even if little else could be extracted from Mary. "Why, Mary," she began, "where have you hidden yourself? You never showed your face all day at Miss Simmonds'. You don't fancy we think any worse of you for what's come and gone. Some on us, indeed, were a bit sorry for the poor young man, as lies stiff and cold for your sake. Mary, but we shall ne'er cast it against you. Miss Simmonds, too, will be mighty put out if you don't come, for there's a deal of mourning agate." "I can't," Mary said in a low voice. "I don't mean to ever come again." "Why, Mary," said Sally in unfeigned surprise, "to be sure you'll have to be in Liverpool Tuesday, and maybe Wednesday, but after that you'll surely come and tell us all about it. Miss Simmonds knows you'll have to be off those 2 days, but between you and me, she's a bit of a gossip, and will like hearing all how and about the trial, well enough to let you off very easy for your being absent a day or two. Besides, Betsy Morgan was saying yesterday she shouldn't wonder but you'd provide quite an attraction to customers. Many a one would come and have their gowns made by Miss Simmonds just to catch a glimpse at you after the trial's over. Really, Mary, you'll turn out quite a heroine." The little fingers twitched worse than ever. The large soft eyes looked up pleadingly into Sally's face, but she went on in the same strain, not from any unkind or cruel feelings toward Mary, but solely because she was incapable of comprehending her suffering. She had been shocked, of course, at Mr. Carson's death, though at the same time the excitement was rather pleasant than otherwise, and dearly now would she have enjoyed the conspicuous notice which Mary was sure to receive. "How shall you like being cross-examined, Mary?" "Not at all," answered Mary, when she found she must answer. "La! What impudent fellows those lawyers are! And their clerks, too, not a bit better. I shouldn't wonder," in a comforting tone, and really believing she was giving comfort, "if you picked up a new sweetheart in Liverpool. What gown are you going in, Mary?" "I don't know, and I don't care," exclaimed Mary, sick and weary of her visitor. "Well, then, take my advice, and go in that blue merino. It's old to be sure, and a bit worn at elbows, but folks won't notice that, and the colour suits you. Now mind, Mary, and I'll lend you my black watered scarf," added she, really good-naturedly, according to her sense of things, and withal a little bit pleased at the idea of her pet article of dress figuring away on the person of a witness at trial for murder. "I'll bring it to-morrow before you start." "No, don't," said Mary. "Thank you, but I don't want it." "Why, what can you wear? I know all your clothes as well as I do my own. What's in there you can wear? Not your old plaid shawl, I do hope. You would not fancy this I have on more nor the scarf, would you?" said she, brightening at the thought, and willing to lend it or anything else. "Oh, Sally, don't go on talking of fattens. How can I think on a dress at such a time, when it's a matter of life and death to Jem?" "Bless the girl! It's Jem, is it? Well, now, I thought there was some sweetheart in the background, when you flew off so with Mr. Carson. Then what, in the name of goodness, made him shoot Mr. Harry? After you'd given up going with him, I mean? Was he afraid you'd be on again?" "How dare you say he shot Mr. Harry?" asked Mary, firing up from the state of languid indifference into which she had sunk, while Sally had been settling about her dress. "But it's no matter what you think as did not know him. What grieves me is, that people should go on thinking him guilty as did know him," she said, sinking back into her former depressed tone and manner. "And don't you think he did it?" asked Sally. Mary paused. She was going on too fast with one so curious and so unscrupulous. Besides, she remembered how even she herself had, at first, believed him guilty, and she felt it was not for her to cast stones at those who, on similar evidence, inclined to the same belief. None had given him much benefit of a doubt. None had faith in his innocence, none but his mother, and the heart loved more than the head reasoned, and her yearning affection had never for an instant entertained the idea that her Jem was a murderer. But Mary disliked the whole conversation. The subject, the manner in which it was treated, were all painful, and she had a repugnance to the person with whom she spoke. She was thankful, therefore, when Job Legh's voice was heard at the door, as he stood with the latch in his hand, talking to a neighbour, and when Sally jumped up in vexation and said, "There's that old fogey coming in here, as I'm alive. Did your father set him to look after you while he was away, or what brings the old chap here? However, I'm off. I never could abide either him or his prim granddaughter. Good-bye, Mary." So far in a whisper, then louder, "If you think better of my offer about the scarf, Mary, just step in to-morrow before 9, and you're quite welcome to it." She and Job passed each other at the door with mutual looks of dislike, which neither took any pains to conceal. "Yon's a bold, bad girl," said Job to Mary. "She's very good-natured," replied Mary, too honourable to abuse a visitor who had only that instant crossed her threshold, and gladly dwelling on the good quality most apparent in Sally's character. "Ay, ay, good-natured, generous, jolly, full of fun. There are a number of other names for the good qualities the devil leaves his children, as baits to catch gudgeons with. D'ye think folk could be led astray by one who was every way bad? However, that's not what I came to talk about. I've seen Mr. Bridgenorth, and he's in a manner the same mind as we. He thinks it would have an awkward look, and might tell against the poor lad on his trial. Still, if she's ill, she's ill, and it can't be helped." "I don't know if she's so bad as all that," said Mary, who began to dread her part in doing anything which might tell against her poor lover. "Will you come and see her, Job? The doctor seemed to say as I liked, not as he thought." "That's because he had no great thought on the subject, either one way or t'other," replied Job, whose contempt for medical men pretty nearly equalled his respect for lawyers. "But I'll go and welcome. I ha' not seen the old ladies since their sorrows, and it's but manners to go and ask after them. Come along." The room at Mrs. Wilson's had that still, changeless look you must have often observed in the house of sickness or mourning. No particular employment going on, people watching and waiting rather than acting, unless in the more sudden and violent attacks. What little movement is going on, so noiseless and hushed, the furniture all arranged and stationary, with a view to the comfort of the afflicted, the window blinds drawn down to keep out the disturbing variety of a sunbeam, the same sad and serious look on the faces of the indwellers. You fall back into the same train of thought with all these associations, and forget the street, the outer world, in the contemplation of the one stationary, absorbing interest within. Mrs. Wilson sat quietly in her chair, with just the same look Mary had left on her face. Mrs. Davenport went about with creaking shoes, which made all the more noise from her careful and lengthened tread, annoying the ears of those who were well, in this instance, far more than the dull sense of the sick and the sorrowful. Alice's voice still was going on cheerfully in the upper room, with incessant talking and little laughs to herself, or perhaps in sympathy with her unseen companions. Unseen, I say, in preference to fancied, for who knows whether God does not permit the forms of those who were dearest when living to hover round the bed of the dying? Job spoke, and Mrs. Wilson answered. So quietly that it was unnatural under the circumstances. It made a deeper impression on the old man than any token of mere bodily illness could have done. If she had raved in delirium, or moaned in fever, he would have spoken after his wont, and given his opinion, his advice, and his consolation. Now he was awed into silence. At length he pulled Mary aside into a corner of the house place, where Mrs. Wilson was sitting, and began to talk to her. "You're right, Mary. She's no ways fit to go to Liverpool, poor soul. Now I've seen her, I only wonder the doctor could have been unsettled in his mind at the first. Choose how it goes with poor Jem, she cannot go. One way or another, it will soon be over. The best to leave her in the state she is till then." "I was sure you would think so," said Mary. But they were reckoning without their host. They esteemed her senses gone, while in fact they were only inert, and could not convey impressions rapidly to the overburdened, troubled brain. They had not noticed that her eyes had followed them, mechanically it seemed at first, as they had moved away to the corner of the room, that her face, hitherto so changeless, had began to work with one or two of the symptoms of impatience. But when they were silent, she stood up, and startled them almost as if a dead person had spoken, by saying clearly and decidedly, "I go to Liverpool. I hear you and your plans, and I tell you I shall go to Liverpool. If my words are to kill my son, they have already gone forth out of my mouth, and naught can bring them back. But I will have faith. Alice, up above, has often told me I want faith, and now I will have it. They cannot, they will not kill my child, my only child. I will not be afraid. Yet, oh, I am sick with terror. But if he is to die, think ye not that I will see him again? Ay, see him at his trial? When all are hating him, he shall have his poor mother near him, to give him all the comfort eyes and looks and tears, and a heart that is dead to all but him, can give. His poor mother, who knows how free he is from sin, in the sight of man at least. They'll let me go to him, maybe, the very minute it's over, and I know many scripture texts, though you would not think it, that may keep up his heart. I missed seeing him ere he went to your prison, but naught shall keep me away again 1 minute when I can see his face, for maybe the minutes are numbered, and the count but small. I know I can be a comfort to him, poor lad. You would not think it now, but he'd always speak as kind and soft to me as if he were courting me, like. He loved me above a bit, and I am to leave him now, to dree all the cruel slander they'll put upon him. I can pray for him at each hard word they say against him, if I can do naught else, and he'll know what his mother is doing for him, poor lad, by the look on my face." Still they made some look or gesture of opposition to her wishes. She turned sharp round on Mary, the old object of her pettish attacks, and said, "Now, wench, once for all, I tell you this. He could never guide me, and he'd sense enough not to try. What he could not do, don't try to. I shall go to Liverpool to-morrow, and find my lad, and stay with him through thick and thin. And if he headies, why, perhaps, God of his mercy will take me too. The grave is a sure cure for an aching heart." She sank back in her chair, quite exhausted by the sudden effort she had made. But if they even offered to speak, she cut them short, whatever the subject might be, with the repetition of the same words, "I shall go to Liverpool." No more could be said. The doctor's opinion had been so undecided. Mr. Bridgenorth had given his legal voice in favour of her going, and Mary was obliged to relinquish the idea of persuading her to remain at home. if, indeed, under all circumstances, it could be thought desirable. "Best way will be," said Job, "for me to hunt out Will early to morrow morning. Mary, come at after with Jane Wilson. I know a decent woman where you two can have a bed, and where we may meet together when I've found Will, afore going to Mr. Bridgenorth's at 2 o'clock; for I can tell him, he'll not trust none of his clerks for hunting up Will, if Jem's life's to depend on it." Now Mary disliked this plan inexpressibly. Her dislike was partly grounded on reason, and partly on feeling. She could not bear the idea of deputing to any one the active measures necessary to be taken in order to save Jem. She felt as if they were her duty, her right. She durst not trust to any one the completion of her plan. They might not have energy, or perseverance, or desperation enough to follow out the slightest chance. Her love would endow her with all these qualities, independent of the terrible alternative which awaited her in case all failed and Jem was condemned. No one could have her motives, and consequently no one could have her sharpened brain, her despairing determination. Besides, only that was purely selfish. She could not endure the suspense of remaining quiet, and only knowing the result when it was all accomplished. So, with vehemence and impatience she rebutted every reason Job adduced for this plan; and, of course, thus opposed by what appeared to him wilfulness, he became more resolute. Angry words were exchanged, and a feeling of estrangement rose up between them, for a time, as they walked homewards. But then came in Margaret with her gentleness, like an angel of peace, so calm and reasonable, that both felt ashamed of their irritation, and tacitly left the decision to her. Only, by the way, I think, Mary could never have submitted if it had gone against her, penitent and tearful as was her manner now to Job, the good old man who was helping her to work for Jem, although they differed as to the manner. "Mary had better go," said Margaret to her grandfather in a low tone. "I know what she's feeling, and it would be a comfort to her soon, maybe, to think that she did all she could herself. She would, perhaps, fancy it might have been different. Do, grandfather, let her." Mary had still, you see, little or no belief in Jem's innocence, and besides, she thought if Mary saw Will, and heard herself from him that Jem had not been with him that Thursday night, it would in a measure break the force of the blow which was impending. "Let me lock up house, grandfather, for a couple of days, and go and stay with Alice. It's but little one like me can do, I know," she added softly, "but, by the blessing of God, I do it and welcome. And here comes one kindly use of money. I can hire them as will do for her what I cannot. Mrs. Davenport is a willing body, and one who knows sorrow and sickness, and I can pay her for her time, and keep her there pretty near altogether. So let that be settled. And you take Mrs. Wilson, dear Grandad, and let Mary go find Will, and you can all meet together at after. And I'm sure I wish you luck." Job consented, with only a few dissenting grunts, but on the whole with a very good grace for an old man who had been so positive only a few minutes before. Mary was thankful for Margaret's interference. She did not speak, but threw her arms round his neck, and put up her rosy red mouth to be kissed; and even Job was attracted by the pretty, childlike gesture, and when she drew near him, afterwards, like a little creature sidling up to some person whom it feels to have offended, he bent down and blessed her as if she had been a child of his own. To Mary the old man's blessing came like words of power. End of chapter 25. Reading by Belinda Brown of Indianapolis, Indiana.